Hi, this is Brett Simon. It's been about a month since I posted an article about the backlog analysis. The backlog has been created by the new document procedure that KCC implemented at the beginning of this year. And I believe there are a number of cases that are waiting to be scheduled that have not been scheduled, and most importantly, want to be scheduled for an interview but have not managed to get their documents approved by KCC yet with the new procedure. So I wanted to have a look at that, and about a month ago, I posted some information about how many 2NLs there have been, how many interviews have been scheduled in each region, and I encourage you to go have a look at this particular article that I wrote about a month ago. At that time, I pointed out there had been an increase in 2NLs or interviews arranged, but I was also posting various documents and comments on my site where I was trying to suggest that there should be about 4,000 2NLs each month from that point forward in order to make sure that all of the cases that wanted an interview were going to get an interview. So I had a look on the SEAC data, and if you go to the SEAC data, you can look at this yourself. You can see how many 2NLs are sent in each month. Very helpfully, as Arthursius makes this data available to us, we can all have a look at that. And you can download these spreadsheets and have a look at those 2NLs. I've done that, and I took account from that data. And I wanted to show some of the information that that I've deduced from that. So, okay, first thing that I'd like to show you. Here's the 2NLs that have been sent over the recent months. And as I say, 2NLs are to do with interviews scheduled. So one 2NL is sent to a selectee and will be for the interview that is scheduled for that selectee and any derivatives that selectee has. So as you can see, there has been a sort of a gentle increase up until June from 2,200 a month going up to 3,700 a month in June. But disappointingly, the number has gone back down again for the 2NLs that were sent for July interviews. It's particularly surprising to me in Africa that number has gone down. And as you can see, the number is slightly lower for the EU region as well. OC and SA, I'm not so worried about, and same thing with Asia. I don't think those regions have too much concern at the moment. But particularly for Africa and to some extent for EU, this picture kind of shows there might be a looming problem here, which will represent itself as disappointment for some of the people that are waiting for their 2NLs. If anyone's more pictorial, sort of picture oriented, this is a visualization of that same data. This is for each region. There's the Africa region, how it's grown, but then has fallen back. The EU region is shown in that grey bar there, more or less flat, a little bit lower now. And overall, the overall picture is June was pretty high at 3,700. I expected that to increase, and it's actually decreased, and that's kind of a problem. So let's have a look at that in more detail in terms of why I think that's a problem. So what I've got here, I've got the SEAC data that we have for 2017, 2018, and 2019 in 3 tabs. And I'm showing that data here, and I want to show you how I analyze that data, or how you can analyze that data at pretty high level just by looking at this picture. So first of all, let's discuss this. The SEAC data shows where there are holes, no responses, holes, refused, AP, transit, ready and issued. All of those are color coded on this graph. And for the Africa region, this is a sort of chunk of data of 1,000 case numbers at a time. And within those 1,000 case numbers, how many of those 1,000 case numbers are holes? How many are non-responses? how many have responded but have been approved or denied, or just simply on AP. Okay, so by looking at this data, we can begin to figure out what's going on. What I'm going to do is just take a screenshot of this, and so I can draw on it, and show you a little bit more what I mean here. So for 2019, we can see that the starting rate of holes was something along the lines of, that point, right? Which is about 35% of cases were holes. The other holes are cases that are disqualified even before the lottery is announced, the lottery results is announced. So these are cases where they've perhaps had a double entry, or their entry was incorrect in some way. It was immediately disqualified, and it creates a hole. So out of 1,000 case numbers, in the first 1,000 cases, something like 350 of those cases were holes this year. That's unusually high compared to other years. I'll show you that in a few moments. But if we just take a rough count there, we can see that's about 35%. And if we do a similar sort of thing here to see how many cases responded, we'll take that number around about here. We can see that the response rate is everybody in this chunk. People responded, they got set up for an interview, they were either denied or approved, or mostly approved, etc. But that's roughly the gap. So there is always a gap between the number of cases that are issued and the number of cases that respond. That's expected, that's normal. And roughly speaking, you can see that of the cases that are real, about, shall we say, 2/3, about 60%, are 60% of those cases actually respond. Okay, and of those 60%, that's roughly how things should proceed. As the year goes on, we know that there's more holes, there's a reducing number of cases that are in the system. This is because certain countries are limited, and so the starting holes rate increases in the later part of the year, or later part of the number range. I've explained that in an article which is called, I think, Holes Theory. So if you want to know a little bit more about that, by all means read that article, and it will explain to you what holes are, why there's this bigger chunk of blue here, why there are less actual cases in the later part of the year. But the section I want to focus on is kind of this section here. This is what's going on right now. Let me just undo that. That's kind of ugly. But this is what I want to show you right now. We can see that at the beginning of the year, there are about 35% holes, and of the cases, we said there's around about 60% will respond and get interviews. At some time, the new document procedure was introduced, and you can see now that there's a bigger gap, a bigger difference between the cases that actually have real cases and the cases that have either responded or been interviewed, etc. Right? It's roughly sort of trending like that. What I would be expecting is that no matter whereabouts we are on here, roughly 60% of the people should be interviewed, and so there is a natural growth that happens towards the end of the year. That's to be expected, but the way we should be seeing this at the moment is that something like that level should be interviewed. It's these cases in between here that I'm worried about. Okay, that's the sort of the worry area there. That's really not well highlighted, but let's just make that a little bit clearer. Like that. Let's switch it. Yeah, that's kind of the danger zone, if you like, that I'm worried about. That's a lot of cases that KCC need to be scheduling. And if they were scheduling those number of cases, we would be seeing a lot of people getting 2NLs, and we wouldn't be seeing a decreasing number of 2NLs that we saw in the July 2NLs. So that's kind of my concern here, and that's why I'm making this video, to point that out. it's absolutely imperative at the moment that people understand the timing of of the process. Um, it used to be, prior to the new document procedure, that if you submitted your DS260, once that was processed and your number was current, you were scheduled for interview. Now there's an extra thing that you have to do, which is sending the documents into KCC. When you send the documents in, you get an automatic response from their system. That's meaningless. It's an automatic response, doesn't mean anything at all. What's important is that they receive the documents and process them. And once they've done that, they can schedule you for the interview. However, a lot of people have not even been asked by KCC for the documents at this point. They may have proactively sent those documents in based on my advice or their own ideas, and that's a good thing. In some cases, we have seen people who were never asked for their documents, but they sent them in anyway, and they have been scheduled. But many more cases have just the experience that if they contact KCC and ask, is my 2NL coming soon? Am I going to be scheduled soon? Are you satisfied with my documents? They're told that their DS260 is still being processed, even though it was submitted many months ago, perhaps even a year ago. That's not strictly correct. There's no way that the DS260 takes a year to process. I've known DS260s be processed in a matter of a couple of weeks. So it's not true that they're still processing those, but it's a way that KCC are using to basically get you off the phone or satisfy you in the email, saying we're still processing your DS260. Call us later, right? So my worry is that they have delayed this until very, very late. It's now June 14th. The interviews for September will be sent out in the middle of next month. From the middle of next month until the end of next month, right? So this is the month of July. And that will be based on cases that are current, which all cases are current, have submitted the DS260, fine, and have got the documents processed. But that normally means documents processed by around about the beginning of the month, either the end of this month or the beginning of next month, very early few days of next month. So you need to get the documents to KCC in the next couple of weeks, the next 2 to 3 weeks at the absolute outside, if you want to get him interviewed in September. And there are no interviews beyond the end of September. So we are running out of time, and people need to understand that they need to respond. So if you're sitting there thinking you're okay because you've sent your documents, but you haven't had your 2NL, and all you've got to show is the automated response, then you need to think about whether you should be contacting KCC to ask them about your interview. Okay, so let me just put that to one side for a second. I'll put that here so we can compare. Just a useful comparison, actually, that I'd like to show you with previous years. This again is 2018 data. It's the African region. A couple of things I was going to show you from this. I'll take the same screenshot so we can see that. So I'll take a screenshot. Okay, if we take that screenshot and start drawing on that, you'll see first thing you'll see is the number of holes was much lower last year. Instead of 35%, it was lower. And the same sort of thing happened in terms of the line that denotes the people that get interviews. It's around about 2/3. Perhaps that's a little bit high, about there. So it's around about 2/3 of the real cases. And no matter when you look at this, you can do the same sort of exercise. So there's the real cases line later on. Here's the cases that that got an interview. Again, it's roughly 2/3. Okay, so in the same way, if we compare that to 2019, we can see a couple of things. Number one, there are more holes this year. That's fine. That's no real problem. But secondly, there isn't the number of cases that have been scheduled that we would expect to be scheduled from the actual cases that exist. And again, if we look back at 2017, same sort of thing, same phenomenon exists. We can do the numbers again. So in 2017, about 20, 21%, 22%, perhaps a little bit more of holes. Roughly speaking, 2/3 of cases, again, get interviewed. There's always going to be 1/3 of cases that will just not even respond. And again, if you draw those lines later on in the year, you see the same sort of thing happens, right? Roughly 2/3 compared to 1/3, roughly 2/3 of cases want an interview. So that's a matter of who wants an interview, and now we have to think about who's going to get an interview, and that's going to be based on a certain amount of chaos that's going to go on at KCC over the coming weeks. Right, so we can do the same thing for other regions. You could do this yourself, but other regions have a similar sort of thing going on. This is the EU region. Switch that to the EU region in 2018. Same sort of deal. You can see the holes rate. You can see there's always this gap of no response. It's typical. And if we look at 2019, which is the year I'm more concerned about for EU, same sort of thing. So let's just have a quick look at this and draw this up. We have a look at this one. Okay, so we can see that there was a much higher number of holes than a normal year for EU, and that in 2017, at the beginning, before there was a new document procedure, roughly again 2/3 of the cases, perhaps a little bit less, expected interview. And as we look at this end of the scale, and all these cases are current, of course, so we look here, and my question is, my question is about this area, right? It's like, where are those cases? When are those cases going to get scheduled? It's not quite so bad in EU as it is in Africa, but there is a definite sort of gap here of cases that would be expecting to be interviewed and have not yet had their interview notification. Okay, so I hope that explains why I've been telling people to be careful of the chaos. My perception is that there is a lot of cases sitting at KCC with DS260 submitted that have not yet been scheduled because they're waiting on this new document procedure. I believe the new document procedure is implemented by a different group of contractors other than the normal KCC group. And when you send your email to KCC documents, KCC DV documents at state.gov, it goes to a different group of people. And I think because it's the first year that group of people are doing this, they're somehow not very efficient in that process at this point. And they have not been asking people and asking cases frequently enough or in enough numbers to send in documents. So there's a gap, and it's a bit of a concern. All right, hope that's making sense. I think that's probably all I've got for you for the time being, just to explain that. But I will come back with other videos over the coming weeks that will explain the process more. And for DV 2020 selectees, I'll be doing a number of these video guides that will explain a little bit more of the process in detail, and perhaps be an alternative method of getting information from me rather than reading the blog. It might be helpful for some people. Let me know your comments in the comment section below. Subscribe to my video channel on YouTube. I'm going to be adding content there. And let me know what you think. Let me know what sort of videos you would like me to do over the coming weeks, what would be helpful for you in your journey. And good luck towards the 2019 selectees. Please don't leave this too late. Follow the advice that I've been giving people in my blog. In particular, for example, read that article. If you are a DV 2019 candidate and you've not yet been interviewed, you need to pay attention to this article. And please take care of your own case, because after September 30th, 2019, there is no further extension allowed. Okay, thanks everyone. Good luck everyone. Have a great weekend.